Amen. It truly is a blessing, like I said, to be here on this afternoon. Amen. To Pastor Schuler in his absence and to the St. James United Methodist Church, I thank you for allowing me to stand before you once more again. Amen. Assignments, like I tell every church I go to, I do not take them lightly, nor do I take them for granted. Amen. But I'm not going to hold your time very long. Amen. Football ain't on, so I know ain't nobody got nowhere to go. Amen. Amen. But I'm not going to hold your patience long, but there is a word from the Lord. Amen. Amen. So if you would turn with me to the Gospel according to Luke. Luke chapter 15. And we're going to journey down on this afternoon through verses 11 through 24, but I'm just going to read verses 20 through 24. Amen. Luke chapter 15, verses 20 through 24. When you have it, let it be known by saying amen. If it is a custom that you stand, you may do so. And it reads, "And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry." And verse 24 says, "For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they began to be merry." God's word for God's people. And if I could use for a subject on this afternoon, time will bring you home. Time will bring you home. May we pray. Oh, gracious and all-wise God, I come to you once more and again, God. First of all, I want to say thank you. God, right now, here is your servant. I'm willing and I'm ready, oh God. God, use me, mold me, and shape me, oh God. God, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Amen. Amen. My brothers and my sisters, no matter what we do in this earthly life, time will eventually bring us home. And time has its way of taking us by the hand and saying to us, come and go with me. Time brings us from one point to another with just the blink of an eye. And if you would consider the fact that we are in Black History Month, if you would think back during the Jim Crow era, African Americans faced many racial tensions. They marched and protested and was beaten all so that we could be free. And once the era of Jim Crow came to an end, time eventually brought us all home to more freedom than we had back then. So I said that to say this, that no matter what we've done or what we do on this side of Jordan, time will bring us home. I don't care what time zone you live in, whether it's EST, PST, AST, or CST time, time will still bring you home. Can I get a witness? Let's look at Eastern Standard Time for an example. When we push time back an hour, we are limited to the number of things that we can do in the daylight, but we gain more darkness. And when the time goes up an hour, we gain more daylight, but we are limited to the number of things that we can do in the dark. But it is hard to do something when we are in the dark. And I stopped by here to tell somebody that whether you like to operate in the dark or in the light, you will be known in the dark as well in the light, because what's done in the dark will soon come to the light. The Bible teaches us that we are to work while it is day, because when night comes, no man will be able to work again. Time will bring you home. In our text on this afternoon in the Gospel of Luke, when this 11th chapter starts, it starts off by telling us 2 of 3 parables in this 11th chapter. And the first parable is a parable about the lost sheep. And the second parable is the parable of the lost coin. And we are going to study this afternoon the third parable entitled the parable of the lost son. And if you would notice about these 3 parables, my brothers and my sisters, they all deal with something that has been lost in the beginning, but in the end it was found and everyone rejoiced. As Jesus began to tell this third parable, he was speaking to the people that were around who were tax collectors, sinners, Pharisees, and scribes. And we see in verses 11 through 12 that Jesus begins to give us a little background information. If you look in your text in verse 11 and 12, he said, "Then he said, a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me.' So he divided to them his livelihood." And in verses 11 through 12, they represent all sinners related to God the Father by creation who waste their potential privileges and refuse any relationship with him, choosing instead a life of sinful indulgence. Then as we move down to verses 13 and 14, the younger son begins to travel off after receiving his possessions and spends up everything that he has. Verse 13 and 14 says that, "And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in the land, and he began to be in want." And if you think verses 13 and 14, they represent the journey that we often take in life. Some people, like the older brother in the text, never wander off into a life of sin. They are saved at a very early age and remain a Christian all of their life. But let me make sure you understand something. Just because you are saved at an early age and remain a Christian all your life, that does not mean you have or have not sinned. The action that took place in verses 15 through 16 was one of the worst sorts of degradation imaginable for Jesus' Jewish audience, because swine were the worst sort of unclean animals. And the younger son thought about eating the food for the swine, but he couldn't because it was indigestible for humans. And if you look in the text, verses 15 through 16 says that, "Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed the swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything." And verses 17 through 19, this younger son begins to realize that he has sinned against the Father, and now it is time for him to go home. It says that, "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and perish with the hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.'" And in verses 17 through 19, he begins to realize that he was a candidate for salvation. And he realizes that the world does not have the answers to what he needs. So in verses 20 through 24 is where we begin to see that time will eventually bring you home. And there's 3 things I want us to understand on this afternoon when time brings us home. The first thing is that we all have sinned. And there was a story about 2 slaves being held in bondage, and they were riding on their ship trying to get to freedom. And one slave looked at another slave and said, "My shackles are more shinier than yours." And the other slave looked at him and said, "You might think your shackles are more shinier than mine, but in reality, we both are in bondage and in shackles for the same reason. So that doesn't make your shackles any shinier than mine." So I said that to say this, that just because we all have sin, my sin isn't bigger, better, or smaller than your sin. The Bible teaches us that we all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And just because we sin, it can oftentimes make us not feel worthy enough to be called a child of God. But God will still own us as his child. The second thing is you can trade out your old for your new. Just like you can trade out your old car for a new car, God can trade out your old ways of living, your old habits, your old clothes, all for something bigger and better in life. We see here in our text that the younger son's old ways of life and his old living has been removed, and now he has put on something new. Jesus said in Revelation 21:5, "Behold, I make all things new." The third and final point is the kingdom family will rejoice when one comes home. It's nothing like good fellowship with one another when someone has traded out their old ways of living for a new life with the Lord. And we see here in our text in verses 23 through 24 that the kingdom family began to rejoice as the younger son decided that it was time to come back home. This truly shows us that time will bring us home. And as I get ready to close, I want us to understand that one day time will bring all of us home. And whether you are ready or not, time will bring you home. And time is going to catch you by the hand and it's going to say to you, "Come on and go with me." But I'm so glad that when time brings all of us home, we will be able to rejoice in good Christian fellowship. But I heard the hymn writer declare, "What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms." I'm so glad that one of these days, it won't be very long, we will be able to fellowship with one another when time brings us all home. Is there anybody in this church on this afternoon that is ready for time to bring you home? You've been running astray for a long time. God is saying it's time to come home. You've been telling the same lies for 30 plus years. God is saying it's time to come home. You've been sinning all of your life. God is saying it's time to come home. And I don't know about you, but when God told me that it was time to come back home, I was ready to come back home. I'm going to leave you with this story. There was a lady who walked home every day. And every day when she walked home, she noticed these two men in black suits were following her. And she began wondering about these two men and why they were following her home. So the lady decided that on Sunday morning she was going to ask her pastor, had he heard of two men in black suits following people around? And she went to the pastor and she said, "Reverend, these two men in black suits been following me home every day, and I don't know who they are." And the Reverend looked at the woman and he said, "Ma'am, those same two men that's been following you home every day, been following me everywhere I've been all my life." He said those two men go by the name of goodness and mercy. This is what David said in the 23rd Psalm when he said, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." The moral of the story is no matter what you go through in life, surely goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of your life, and time will bring you home. Ain't God all right? Ain't he all right? Say yeah. what we got to grasp the concept of is that no matter how hard life may get, or you may seem like that everything is only happening to you. Something happens to everyone, amen? And eventually time will bring you home. Amen. Amen. God bless you, and may heaven continue to smile upon you.